Hey guys, how are you? Happy Friday. You're about to finish your first week of remote learning. So we're still going to be working on this together. We're going to keep doing this until we are hopefully allowed back in school. And I know that you guys are watching this on Friday, but I'm recording on Thursday. And today is actually a very sad day for me because today is opening day, or was supposed to be opening day of the baseball season. In case you guys didn't realize, I'm a huge baseball fan. As I hold this baseball bat in front of me, you see all the balls behind me are signed by different players that I love. And if we were in school today, I would have taken a couple minutes to show you guys some baseball nerd highlight videos of the New York Yankees. And my unofficial love of the New York Yankees is pretty clear. But for now, I'm just gonna use this bat to point at you guys and say, do your homework and make sure you are putting the attachment in the assignment folder. No more posting on the stream, and try not to email me. Miss Grace made a great video. I hope you guys watch it. But now, on to more important things. We have to talk about the start of lesson 3. Now, today is going to be focused on one thing in particular: taxes. And there's going to be one phrase that comes in that's going to be a very important phrase, and it's a very important phrase in our history, and that is no taxation without representation. Okay? Before we get into taxes and all that, we do have to go over our essential question, focus question, and content framing question for today. Our essential question for the whole unit is still, why is it important to understand all sides of a story? The focus question is, what are the two perspectives in George versus George? And the content framing question, which is for today, is what is happening in pages 18 through 22? Okay? Now, 18 through 22, we are moving on, so I'm glad to be doing that because I have a feeling you guys might have read pages 8 through 17 a couple too many times, but hey, that's what we got to do. Now, under that, I have no taxation without representation, so that's going to be a big part of today's lesson. What's another part of today's lesson that's big is text features, and the text feature of headings. Headings are important because they tell you what the text below is all about, okay? A heading is basically telling you the main idea of that section. Now, on to the bigger picture. Tax. What is a tax? Why are they a thing? Why are they important? I'm about to answer all that for you, okay? I don't know a ton about taxes. I know I pay taxes for my house, on my paycheck, to the state, to the federal government, which is the entire country. But what a tax is money paid to the government okay? But then the government uses that money to function, basically, to run, to set up certain programs, okay? To help with schools, to help with any construction. If you see construction on the roads, that's tax dollars that come out of my paycheck or anybody's paycheck being put to use. Now, if you go shopping, and you buy some clothes, you'll notice that there is a sales tax. Or if you go to a restaurant, there is a sales tax. That tax is collected by New York State and helps pay for things like schools, road construction, and many other things that are important to us being able to live in society and function, okay? So, now we know that tax is money paid to the government. Who do you guys think is going to be paying the money to who as we read today, okay? So, we're going to be reading 18 through 22. And you guys today are going to be doing a chart that's very similar to the chart that you did yesterday, okay? Except this time I will have a better version of it. You will probably be able to type right in it, and you won't have to worry about the spaces at the bottom, okay? Now, the trouble with taxes. So what stirred up in the hornet's nest in the first place? It all began over money and over the rights of citizens too. Great Britain had been one war or another for 50 years and was drowning in debt. And so debt is when you owe somebody money. So because England was always at war, wars are very expensive. And so to make up that money, they needed to charge taxes. Over in London, Parliament decided that Americans should help out by paying their fair share, and King George agreed. So they said, since we can't fix the problem ourselves, we're going to tax the people in the colonies. After all, Great Britain had spent plenty of money fighting in America for the good of the colonies. The Crown was still supporting the British Army to help stop Indian attacks on the American frontier. It was Great Britain's right to collect payment. To raise the money, Parliament added a Sugar Act and a Stamp Act, saying that colonists had to pay taxes to Great Britain for all sorts of imported goods, from molasses, blue indigo dye, and pimentos to printed items such as marriage licenses, playing cards, and newspapers. Similar taxes were often collected in England, but the colonists were already paying separate taxes to cover their own war debts and to run the colonies. A lot of them thought paying twice wasn't one bit fair. Besides, they believed it was against the British Constitution. Ever since the Middle Ages, English law had said that there should be no taxation without representation. Okay? So I'm going to add to our chart here, I'm going to add Stamp Act. And the Sugar Act. Okay? And I'm going to start with these guys. And what they did was they forced colonists to pay extra taxes on items they needed to make up British war debt. Okay? So, I'll say debt is when you owe money. Okay? So a perfect example of this is right now a lot of people are buying crazy amounts of toilet paper. That would be like you needing toilet paper. When you go to the store, you're already paying a tax on it, and then if your brother or your dad or your mom or your sister, whoever, has all the toilet paper in your house, is then charging you more money to use the toilet paper. So you're buying the toilet paper for yourself, you're paying a tax on it at the store. Then when you go home, your mom or your dad is saying, oh, you need to pay me also to use that toilet paper. That's pretty much what was happening here. Now, you can make up your own minds on whether you think that that's a fair thing to have happened to the colonists or not. But for me, I'm going to say, we didn't fight that war for them. Why are you charging us taxes? That's just my view of it. Now, so the English themselves said there should be no taxation without representation. And this goes back to yesterday with the government, okay? So pay attention. This meant that citizens could never be taxed unless their elected representatives voted to pay. The colonists were British citizens, and the law guaranteed them rights of Englishmen. So where was their right to have representatives who could vote for or against the taxes? Though many colonists would stay loyal to the Crown and obey its laws no matter what, others argued that Parliament might make them pay even more taxes without consent. So basically, they were afraid that England was like, oh, we're going to charge one tax and then another tax, and people would be like, okay, like whatever, it's not that many taxes. But then eventually, there'd be a lot more taxes added in. Okay, so down here we have Samuel Adams. If our trade may be taxed, why not our lands and everything we possess or make use of? And then it says, by an English poet, that this stamp tax, no doubt, may be good for the crown, but I fear it's a pill that will never go down. So even though they might have thought it was good for the British government, he thought this might cause a problem. Many colonial merchants refused to buy British goods. Pamphlet writers roared. So pamphlets were back in the day before they had newspapers. Preachers thundered from their pulpits. Angry members of organizations called the Sons of Liberty stripped royal office holders naked and covered them with hot tar and goose feathers. They used to tar and feather folks in Great Britain too in those days. So there's the Sons of Liberty, and what they were doing was they were colonists who were super patriotic and were not for all of these taxes. A mob completely wrecked the home of the royal governor of Massachusetts. A straw dummy dressed to look like the stamp distributor was hung from a 120-year-old elm tree. And the British stamp tax that Americans were supposed to pay were burned in every colony. I am more and more grieved at the accounts of America. It is undoubtedly the most serious matter that ever came before Parliament, and that's King George. So King George is starting to worry that the colonists are treating the British soldiers this way and hurting the items that the British have a tax on. By the time the Stamp Act was supposed to go into effect in November of 1765, flags were being flown at half-mast to mourn the death of liberty. Nobody in America would even distribute the stamps. 4 months later, hoping to restore peace, Parliament finally gave up and got rid of the hated taxes. So Parliament, the British government, steps in and says, okay, no more taxes. This troubled King George, who still thought the taxes were fair, but he signed the repeal anyway. Repeal means to take away. British merchants were delighted to get their lost customers back, and all of the Americans celebrated. Well, the story could have ended right there, but of course it didn't. To show they weren't afraid to tax the colonies, Parliament started demanding even more taxes. Patriot leaders in Massachusetts and Virginia made polite protests to the king, but politeness didn't help at all. So they basically were like, hey, we don't want to pay these taxes, don't put them on us, don't do this to us, but it didn't work. So they started to take a little bit more of extreme measures. King George believed that God gave noblemen the divine right to rule and that the colonists had the duty to obey. So that because they weren't well-off people, the colonists were considered just people who had to follow all the laws the king made. The British stubbornly informed legislatures in both colonies that they couldn't have any more meetings, so the colonists stopped trying to be polite. The Virginians, including George Washington, met anyway and banned the sale of all items taxed by Great Britain. So basically, you can't sell anything that came from Britain, we don't want it, nobody's going to buy it, and we're going to do this together. The colonists smuggled in untaxed goods from other countries, which was illegal, and made lots of their own goods instead of buying British ones. A women's group called the Daughters of Liberty supported the cause by weaving their own cloth, making their own ball gowns, and brewing their own Liberty tea out of sassafras flowers. King George was sure that certain gentlemen who pretended to be patriots in Massachusetts were more than criminals, so he sent a fleet of warships to Boston to make them behave. 700 soldiers wearing fancy uniforms soon paraded upon Boston streets, with muskets on their shoulders. Whenever they went off duty, many stole, got drunk, and chased women. So also infuriated worshippers by purposely racing horses, beating drums, and gambling under church windows on Sundays. So they were there to do a job, but they didn't take their job very seriously, and they did a lot of bad things. In March of 1770, an angry mob of American rowdies started taunting 8 of King George's soldiers and pelting them with snowballs. Then someone threw a lump of wood at a redcoat and knocked him flat. The enraged troops began firing into the crowd, and 5 colonists were killed. Furious Sons of Liberty later labeled this disaster the Boston Massacre, and it stirred up plenty of anger on both sides. So, some American colonists were shot for throwing snowballs at the soldiers and tormenting them and kind of yelling at them and shouting at them. So this is going to be one of those things that starts to build some tension and heads towards a conflict. Because right now we have a pretty strong conflict of the colonists don't want to pay a tax and the British want a tax. So that's a conflict, okay? which is interesting because today you're going to have to see both sides of that argument, okay? You're going to be working on handout 3A, okay? And handout 3A is very similar to the sheet you had yesterday. It's going to have British perspective, and it's going to have colonist perspective. You're going to have to be listening to the recording of me reading and filling in the blanks again. It's going to be the same sentences, we'll have blanks in them, and you're going to fill them in. The directions will be right on the page. I will leave directions in this lesson format for you. So please guys, make sure you're reading directions, make sure you're reading the comments for each lesson, because I am telling you and giving you everything you guys need. Today was a little bit better, but I'm still getting a lot of questions of, I can't see it, or what do I do here? Please be reading directions, okay? But that's it for today. I know another long video, but it was a lot of reading. Hopefully you guys are able to stop, pause, rewind, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you can fill in the chart, and there's going to be some more RACS responses. They're getting better, so I appreciate that. All right, have a good weekend, guys. Bye.